This is Inside the Right. Tim, you've worked in Republican politics for a long time. After what we saw on that debate stage, I guess the first question I want to know the answer to is there a way, with about 50 days to go, for Donald Trump to come back from the hole that he's dug himself into?
Well, it gets harder after yesterday, where now he said that he's, I guess, scared to debate Kamala Harris again. I mean, he's pretending that it's because he won or whatever, even though countless Republicans, including first and foremost Lindsey Graham to me in the spin room, acknowledged it was a disaster and said that he should he needs a new strategy, a new debate team. So if he's not going to do another debate, what is another inflection point for him? The conventions are passed. The campaign's kind of an autopilot. I assume their theory of the case is the unfortunate reality that Republicans have an advantage in the electoral college, and they think maybe through ads and turnout, like he's just going to try to juice the white working class base as much as possible in states like Pennsylvania, and hope that that's good enough to win an inside straight while losing the popular vote. I really think that that is his path forward. And by the way, I think it's possible. People should not get overconfident. I mean, I think it's almost impossible, really, to see him winning the popular vote at this point. But there still is a narrow electoral college path for him, and I guess that's at least as we sit here today, where what they think their path is back.
What was the overall sentiment in the spin room in the aftermath of the debate? Like, look, everybody has eyes, right? Like, we can all see what's happening in real time. When Joe Biden was on that debate stage with Donald Trump, it didn't take long before people recognized the reality that we were sitting in. This was the same situation where it didn't take long for Kamala to start baiting Donald Trump, and for him, worse, to start taking that bait and revealing himself as unhinged as he was. And so what was the overall sentiment among everybody in the spin room?
Yeah, it's funny. So you're watching the debate in the media filing center, which is just media, right? Not with the campaign surrogates. But these days, there's a lot of partisan media out there, right? So like you could sense, I think probably about a half an hour in the kind of Newsmax Fox quadrant of the cafeteria, of the high school cafeteria, that
Yeah.
the energy was shifting, and there was, some increased excitement among those of us who are opposed to Donald Trump and other parts of the room. So then the spinners come out, right? And this is just a rule of thumb always. The first, surrogates out, their side won. The Kamala Harris surrogates were out there, Gavin and Jason Crow, and they have these little placards with their names on them, and the placards are being held high, and they're smiling. And then a few minutes later, the Trump surrogates trickle in, and their placards are being held low, and they kind of don't want to do interviews. I took forever for Gates to get in there, and like the core team. Trump then comes to the spin room, which is also a sign they lost. And when I was going around talking to the MAGA folks, they didn't even have anything. They hadn't even come up with a line yet, except complaining about the moderators. And I asked two or three of his surrogates what they thought his best moment was, and they couldn't give me one. It was just very plain from all metrics, even among the kind of MAGA world people. Not all of them were going to admit it, of course, but like all of the subtext was that they knew it was a bad night.
Well, so what we've seen in the aftermath of that is, again, to your exact point, you alluded to the fact that they've been complaining about the moderators. There are these conspiracy theories that Kamala Harris was using an earpiece, which, by the way, to get answers to what? I mean, she just had to bait Trump with the easiest bait in the world to get him to say that. She just had to go out and say that his crowd size was small. What does she need somebody in her earpiece saying, or to give, or this idea that they needed to feed her the answers, or gave her the questions in advance? It's a political debate. What do you think the questions are going to be about? It's going to be
My
about.
favorite. This is my favorite one, that they have a whistleblower that's like Kamala knew the questions. Like the questions were, what do you think about the economy and inflation,
Yeah.
abortion policy, immigration? It didn't take Nostradamus to figure out what the questions were going to be.
Right. This wasn't like some surprise pop quiz about thermodynamics. It was abortion, international affairs, and the economy.
Yeah, and Trump's comments about her turning black, which he knew that she was going to get asked about. Yeah, no, Trump gets asked. To your point, the prime example of this is just to show the absurdity of like this notion that knowing the questions in advance would help. Trump gets asked about immigration, his core issue, but he can't help himself but spend the first half of the answer responding to Kamala's earlier comment about how people leave his rallies because they get bored. So he started talking about how great his rally. So on his core issue, when he should be prosecuting a case against Kamala, he gets totally waylaid by this, and then he starts like that. And then that later in the answer is when he does the famous thing. Now, the now iconic, if you will. What's a word for bad? Iconic.
Yeah, yeah, notorious,
Yeah,
infamous,
notorious.
infamous.
Infamous. Yeah, there you go. Infamous remarks about they eat dogs, they're eating the pets or abducting the pets. Like, so he knew like they were going to ask about immigration. It wasn't like a tough question that he needed to be prepped for, but he just couldn't do it because he has no discipline, because he's deranged, because he's losing, his faculties are starting to diminish, and he just can't help himself. So like that's what happened. That's not, you don't need a conspiracy theory to figure out what happened.
Isn't it ironic that after everything we saw in the first debate and Joe Biden taking the question handed to him on a silver platter, which was the question of abortion, and him voluntarily pivoting to migrant crime, like the worst issue possible, now we have Donald Trump, who is asked a question on immigration, and he voluntarily pivots to an unhinged rampage about his crowd sizes, which then goes into
Or
they're
three.
eating dogs and cats, and for him, who was the beneficiary of Joe Biden's inability to perform well on the debate stage, for him to do the exact same thing, isn't that just so ironic?
It is. And the other thing, it just also betrays the absurdity of the we can't trust the biased media. It's just like CNN did the first debate, and objectively, Donald Trump won. I'm sure he lied, and there's a lot of things to
Right.
criticize about it. But like, so clearly, it's possible to handle mainstream media moderators. But there's something about Vice President Harris, and we've talked about this before. They had this frame of the race where that I think that Trump was very comfortable with, right? Which was like, I'm the alpha dog. I can fix things. Things have gotten bad. Joe Biden is feeble and old and has lost a step. And I can just go at him and say, like, things are better with me and things are worse than you. And it's because, you're too weak to lead the country. Lot false about that, but like that was his frame. Like that was the frame of the race that he was very comfortable in.
Right.
After the switch, he's lost, man. Like he doesn't know what to do. He clearly is not the alpha anymore. He wouldn't even look at her. Like he couldn't even look at Kamala Harris. Like she was staring him down. I mean, talk about who was the dominant presence in the room. Like you didn't even need to hear the words to know. And so there's something about this change that has really disoriented him, and it's revealed a lot of all these feelings that all of us have always seen, but I think are being really laid bare for the whole country.
Tim, I think there's no doubt about the extent to which the debate between Trump and Biden was cataclysmic in a way that we haven't seen before. Do you think that this debate, that there's the possibility that this debate is just as impactful as the first one?
Well, I mean, Donald Trump's not going to leave the race, so it
Right,
can't be
right.
to the back. I feel it's too late. But I do. I mean, look, the
I
even
guess,
the
I guess the I guess the fair way to put it is: are these two debates together perhaps the most impactful debates that we've seen in a modern election cycle?
Absolutely, absolutely, and if you just and that doesn't necessarily mean that again that Harris is going to be winning in a landslide
Right.
by the time the polls kind of start to come out next week, and this was sort of the defense of Biden from people like after that first debate was like the polls were coming out and they weren't good, right? But it wasn't like he was at it wasn't like Trump was winning by 15 or something, right? We're a divided country, right? And so changes these days happen on the margins in a way that didn't in the 1980s, right? But that said, small changes are in close races are very are critical, right?
Yeah.
And so in that sense, this pair of debates. I don't even know what you would compare. I guess maybe 1960, Kennedy and Nixon. It's the first televised debate. That's the first time people learned. It's like, oh wait, body language matters, and Nixon's sweating, and like all. So like that had like long-term implications. I don't think there's anything else between 1960 and this year that's even close.
And finally, let's end off with this, because I know the Trump folks watch this show religiously. And so, do you think that Donald Trump should show up for another debate?
I don't see how he can't. It is so weak. It is so like again. We're in such unprecedented times. It always feels like what is the best example of this? I can't think of somebody of a move that would be as weak as this in politics.
leaving off like on like in the basement, basically.
Yeah, just being like, I give up. Like I'm
Yeah,
just, I give up. I can't take her on. She's too good. I can't even look at her.
yeah.
I can't debate her again. I'm not up for it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just go to my golf clubs and send out all caps bleats and golf and then do rallies and hope that's good enough. I just think that his manhood is such that it requires him to try again. That's my perspective, but maybe not. Maybe he's just too intimidated.
To that point, do you think Kamala will do one? Should she do one?
So I got to say, I was surprised and impressed. I'll say impressed that they came out so quickly to say, let's do another debate. Because, having been in those rooms, like after debates, well, it's like, you really don't want to make any big decisions like that right then. It's like, we just got off the stage. My candidate had a great debate. You can imagine one advisor saying, I think we should challenge him to another one right away. And another one being like, are we sure? Should we wait and see what the polls are? And should we bother the vice president with this choice, like right after this big moment? And so I wasn't in the room when this decision was made, but it was like, bam. I mean, the spin room was still happening when the vice president's campaign already said, let's do another one. So I thought that just showed that was like a sign of dominance
Yeah,
that it's like what's the movie? Have you seen the movie Up with the old man and the dogs? And you have
yeah,
like the dominant dog puts on the collar and like I'm the alpha dog now.
yeah.
That's what it was for me. Like she just demonstrated that she is the dominant figure in the race, and so I was impressed that they did that. And why not? Yeah, let's do it. Let's roll it back.
Yeah.
Let's why stop when you're having fun?
Yeah, that's right. Well, with that said, for those watching right now, to support the work that Tim and his team are doing, which is so critical because as Republicans, as former Republicans, the folks at the Bulwark, the whole team at the Bulwark there gives a permission structure for conservative voters, for independent voters to know that it is okay to support the candidacy of Kamala Harris, to not just feel like you have to vote for Donald Trump. And so if you're not yet subscribed to the Bulwark, I'll put the link right here on the screen and also in the post description of this video. Please make sure to subscribe, help grow this entire pro-democracy ecosystem. They also do amazing work. Tim, thank you so much for taking the time. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen.
I'm Tim Miller.
This is Inside the Right.